Picture this. Two people face the exact same crisis. One crumbles under pressure, making rushed choices that spiral into disaster. The other remains calm, sees opportunities hidden in chaos, and emerges stronger than before. What separates them? Not intelligence, not luck, not education. The person who thrives has rewired their brain to process challenges differently. While most people react, they strategize. While others panic, they analyze. While the majority stumbles blindly forward, they see patterns invisible to everyone else. Here's the truth nobody talks about. Your brain right now is operating on autopilot, using outdated programming designed for a world that no longer exists. But in the next 26 minutes, you're going to discover how to upgrade your mental operating system and unlock strategic thinking abilities you didn't know you possessed. Are you ready to become the person who sees solutions when others see only problems? Every moment of your life, your brain makes calculations. Should I say this? Take that job? Trust this person? But here's the disturbing reality. Most calculations are run by a brain, essentially still living in the Stone Age. Your neural wiring evolved to avoid predators, not navigate modern complexity. That's why smart people make terrible decisions. Why educated individuals fall for obvious scams. Why talented professionals sabotage their own success. The problem isn't your capability, it's your mental framework. Today, you'll discover practical techniques used by chess champions, successful investors, and innovative leaders who consistently outperform their competition. By the time we finish, you'll possess a mental toolkit that most people never even know exists. The transformation begins now. Chapter 1. The 3 Pillars of Strategic Genius. Ever wonder why some people glide through complexity while you're drowning in it? They've discovered something extraordinary. Exceptional thinking is built on 3 invisible frameworks. First pillar, pattern intelligence. While average thinkers see isolated events, strategic minds see interconnected systems. When a company loses market share, most blame products or marketing. Strategic thinkers examine supply chains, customer psychology, emerging technologies, and economic undercurrents simultaneously. They understand that visible problems are symptoms of invisible forces. Think of it like learning to read music instead of just hearing sounds. Once you understand structure, you predict what comes next. Second pillar, multi-timeline awareness. Most people optimize for today. Strategic thinkers optimize for a decade from now while handling today's demands. They ask, how will this choice compound? What second-order consequences will emerge? Warren Buffett isn't richer because he's smarter than day traders. He's richer because he thinks in decades, while they think in minutes. Third pillar, leverage consciousness. Not all actions create equal results. Some produce linear returns, but certain actions produce exponential returns. Same effort, 10 times the result. Strategic thinkers obsess over finding high-leverage activities. They'd rather spend a week thinking through one decision that saves a year of execution than rush into action leading nowhere. Chapter 2. How your brain betrays you. Your brain consumes 20% of your body's energy while weighing only 2% of total mass. To conserve energy, it creates shortcuts and habits. Brilliant for routine tasks, terrible for complex decisions. Pattern matching gone wrong. Your brain loves patterns. When encountering something new, it searches for something familiar and applies whatever worked before. This fails when surface similarities hide fundamental differences. Business leaders who dominated stable markets often fail when conditions become volatile. They keep applying yesterday's solutions to today's different problems. Emotional hijacking. When stress hits, primitive brain areas seize control from analytical centers. Stress hormones flood your system, narrowing focus, impairing memory, reducing flexibility. The cruel irony: the more important the decision, the more likely stress compromises thinking exactly when you need it most. The comfort trap. Your brain treats familiarity as safety. New approaches feel dangerous. Familiar approaches feel safe, even when failing. This keeps people trapped in dying industries, toxic relationships, and obsolete strategies long after better alternatives become obvious. Breaking free. Develop mental tripwires alerting you when autopilot runs the show, feeling stuck, experiencing strong emotions, applying familiar solutions without analysis, avoiding difficult decisions. When you catch these triggers, pause, take 3 deep breaths. Ask, am I thinking strategically or reacting automatically? This pause creates space for conscious choice. Chapter 3. Defeating cognitive biases. Your brain doesn't occasionally make mistakes. It makes systematic, predictable errors you can't see even when looking for them. Confirmation bias. Once you form an opinion, your brain filters information to support it. Contradictory evidence literally doesn't register or gets reinterpreted. This explains why intelligent people hold opposite views using the same facts. They're not seeing the same information. Their brains filter differently. The danger. Confirmation bias creates false confidence. The more you research, the more evidence you find for your position, increasing certainty. You don't realize you're only seeing one side. The availability trap. If you easily remember something, your brain assumes it happens frequently. If you can't remember examples, it assumes rarity. People overestimate dramatic dangers like plane crashes while underestimating mundane threats like heart disease. Why? Plane crashes are memorable and heavily reported. Heart disease is boring, anchoring. Whatever information you encounter first becomes a reference point, disproportionately influencing all subsequent judgments. In negotiations, whoever states a number first sets an anchor, pulling all counteroffers toward it, even when everyone knows it's arbitrary. Overconfidence. People's confidence intervals are far too narrow because they drastically underestimate uncertainty. Events they think have 5% chance of occurring, they happen about 25% of the time. Defeating biases. Use the outside view. Don't focus on specific details making your case feel unique. Ask, what typically happens in situations like this? Use pre-mortem analysis. Instead of planning for success, imagine your plan failed spectacularly. Work backward to identify what could have caused failure. This reveals blind spots, normal planning misses. Chapter 4. Mental models that multiply your intelligence. Mental models are simplified representations of how things work, thinking tools helping you understand, predict, and navigate complexity. Here's the power. When you truly understand a mental model, you can apply it across completely different domains. Compound effects. Everyone understands compound interest in money, but compound effects apply everywhere. Knowledge compounds when building on previous foundations. Relationships compound when trust builds on positive interactions. Skills compound when new capability leverage existing strength. Understanding compounding transforms how you invest time. You seek opportunities to create compound effects, not just linear improvements. Feedback loops. Reinforcing loops amplify changes, creating exponential growth or decline. Success attracts resources, enabling more success. Failure creates self-doubt, producing more failure. Balancing loops create stability by counteracting changes. High prices reduce demand, lowering prices. Understanding feedback loops reveals why some problems persist despite intervention, and why some strategies produce unexpectedly dramatic results. Leverage points. Within any system, certain places allow small changes to produce disproportionate results. For health improvement, parameter-level intervention means exercising more, Structural intervention means redesigning your environment to make healthy choices automatic. Paradigm intervention means transforming your identity so healthy behavior becomes natural expression. Probabilistic thinking. Stop thinking in certainties. Think about probability distributions and expected values. Instead of "will this work?" ask, "what's the probability distribution of outcomes? What's the expected value considering upside and downside?" Jeff Bezos didn't know Amazon would become a trillion-dollar company. He calculated a high probability that internet commerce would grow significantly and positioned himself to capture value from that trend. The lattice work. No single model suffices for complexity. You need multiple complementary models reinforcing each other. When facing challenges, apply several models and seek insights from their intersection. Where multiple models point the same direction, confidence increases. Where they conflict, deeper investigation is needed. Chapter 5. First Principles Thinking. Most people think by analogy. They encounter something new and ask, "What does this remind me of?" Then copy what worked before. Efficient, but also a prison. First Principles Thinking breaks you free. Instead of reasoning by analogy, you break down problems to fundamental truths and build solutions from there. The rocket example. Elon Musk didn't accept that rockets cost millions because they'd always cost millions. He asked, "What are rockets made of? What do materials cost? What are the fundamental physical laws?" This revealed rockets were expensive, not due to physics, but due to design assumptions. Traditional rockets were expendable because that's how they'd always been built, not because nature required it. That insight led to reusable rockets, slashing launch costs, and opening entirely new possibilities. 3 steps. Step 1. Surface hidden assumptions. Every problem arrives with assumptions about what's possible and required. These feel like facts about reality. Surface them by constantly asking why and what if this weren't true. For every constraint, ask whether it's a fundamental law or arbitrary convention. Most constraints are conventions masquerading as laws. Step 2. Decompose to fundamentals. Break complex problems into basic elements, relationships, and governing principles rather than focusing on surface features. Traffic congestion traditionally focuses on building more roads. First Principles analysis reveals the fundamental issue is inefficient use of space and time. This could lead to solutions involving shared autonomous vehicles or alternative transportation modes. Step 3. Rebuild from ground up. Construct new possibilities using only fundamental components you've identified. This is where First Principles thinking becomes creative and generative. Netflix questioned conventional entertainment distribution. Instead of accepting physical media rental, they asked, "What do customers actually want?" This led to streaming, then original content production, each step reimagining entertainment from fundamental requirements. Chapter 6. Making Decisions Under Pressure. The cruel irony. You make your worst choices precisely when stakes are highest. When pressure mounts, cognitive systems responsible for strategic thinking get hijacked by primitive survival mechanisms designed for physical threats, not complex challenges. Understanding the hijacking. When you perceive threats or urgent deadlines, stress hormones flood your system. These chemicals narrow attention, impair memory, and shift your brain into reactive mode, perfect for outrunning predators. Disastrous for negotiations or investment decisions. Stress inoculation. Train your brain to maintain cognitive function despite stress. Practice decision-making deliberately under artificial pressure. If you present under stress, practice while exercising or under time constraints. Gradually increase pressure in controlled environments so your brain develops neural pathways to maintain analytical thinking when stressed. The ODA framework. Implement predetermined protocols, guiding thinking when cognitive abilities are compromised. ODA. Observe, orient, decide. Under pressure, Systematically observe the situation. Orient yourself by understanding context and objectives. Decide on a course of action. Act decisively while remaining ready to restart the cycle. This prevents rushing into action without analysis, while also preventing analysis paralysis. The 10-10-10 rule. When rushed, you focus entirely on immediate consequences while ignoring long-term implications. Counter this. For any significant decision under pressure, quickly consider how you'll feel about each option in 10 minutes, 10 months, and 10 years. This forces temporal perspective even when immediate pressures scream for attention. Good enough beats perfect. When deadlines are truly fixed, focus on making good enough decisions rather than perfect decisions. Perfectionism leads to analysis paralysis and missed deadlines. Identify minimum viable criteria for acceptable decisions and choose the first option, meeting those criteria. Chapter 7. Pattern Recognition Mastery. Pattern recognition, separating experts from amateurs, isn't about seeing more. It's about seeing differently. Chess grandmasters don't analyze more moves than novices. They recognize meaningful patterns instantly. Successful investors don't have more information. They recognize patterns in market behavior others miss. Building pattern recognition. Development begins with systematic observation. Most people observe passively, noticing only what directly affects them. Strategic pattern recognition requires active, structured observation where you deliberately seek connections, cycles, and recurring themes. Identify key variables in your domain and track how they change over time. Keep records. Look for recurring themes across different periods. Test pattern hypotheses against subsequent events.
Historical analysis.
Current events always feel unique and unprecedented. Most seemingly novel situations are variations of patterns that have played out many times before. Studying history helps recognize deeper patterns and avoid being misled by surface differences. For business strategy, study how previous companies responded to technological disruption and economic cycles. The goal isn't assuming history repeats exactly, it's understanding underlying dynamics that tend to recur. Leading indicators. These are early signals, suggesting larger patterns are beginning to unfold, changes occurring before main trends become visible. Identifying reliable leading indicators gives significant strategic advantages because you can position yourself advantageously before broader patterns become apparent. The challenge? Distinguishing meaningful signals from random noise. Not every early change represents the beginning of larger patterns. Cross-domain recognition. The same underlying patterns often appear in business, biology, psychology, and social systems. Network effects appear in technology platforms, social movements, and immune responses. Understanding network effects in one domain helps recognize them in others. Viral spread patterns appear in infectious diseases, social media content, and financial contagion. Mathematical models describing viral spread in epidemiology provide insights into how ideas or market panics might spread through economic networks. Chapter 8. Decomposing complex problems. Complex problems feel overwhelming because your brain perceives them as single massive challenges rather than collections of smaller manageable components. The fundamental insight. Complexity is often an illusion created by interconnection rather than inherent difficulty. Most complex problems consist of multiple simple problems interact. Structural decomposition. Identify core components and understand how they relate. Ask, what are the main subsystems within this problem? For business challenges, market factors, internal capabilities, competitive dynamics, regulatory constraints, financial requirements. Once you've identified main components, map relationships between them, which components influence others. Where are feedback loops? This often reveals that one complex problem is actually several simpler problems with well-defined interaction patterns. Temporal decomposition. Break problems down by time horizons. Many problems feel overwhelming because they mix immediate, urgent issues with long-term strategic challenges. Identify which aspects need immediate attention, which require medium-term development, and which involve long-term positioning. Create separate work streams for each time horizon. This temporal separation often reveals that some seemingly urgent issues are symptoms of long-term problems requiring strategic solutions. Constraint-based decomposition. Identify and categorize different types of limitations you're facing. Some constraints are immutable facts you must accept. Others are resource limitations that could be addressed with investment. Still others are self-imposed restrictions based on assumptions that could be questioned. Theory of constraints analysis helps identify which constraint currently limits progress most severely. Once you address the primary constraint, a different constraint typically becomes the limiting factor. Root cause analysis. Most visible problems are symptoms of deeper issues. The 5 whys technique involves asking why repeatedly to drill down from surface symptoms to root causes. When you encounter problems, ask why they happened. Then ask why that underlying cause happened. Continue until you reach causes that are truly fundamental. Addressing symptoms provides temporary relief. Identifying root causes enables permanent solutions. Chapter 9. Strategic communication. Strategic communication isn't about presenting information clearly. It's about understanding how different audiences process information and what motivates them to act. Deep audience analysis. Before crafting any message, understand who you're communicating with, what they care about, how they make decisions, and what constraints they operate under. Effective analysis goes beyond demographics to understand psychographics and decision-making processes. What are their current beliefs? What information sources do they trust? What would motivate them to change? Strategic message architecture. Message structure significantly impacts comprehension and persuasion. The primacy effect means information presented first has disproportionate influence. The recency effect means information presented last is most easily remembered. For complex messages, use the pyramid principle. Start with conclusions, provide supporting arguments, offer detailed evidence. For persuasive messages, use problem agitation solution. Establish that a problem exists. Help the audience feel the costs of not solving it. Present your solution as the most effective way to address it. The power of story. Stories are more memorable than abstract arguments and create emotional engagement that pure logic can't achieve. Effective strategic stories follow the hero's journey structure. A protagonist faces a challenge, struggles with obstacles, and ultimately succeeds through specific actions. Your audience should see themselves as the hero, with your recommendations providing the insights they need to overcome their challenges. Principled negotiation. Most negotiations aren't truly zero-sum games, where one person's gain requires another's loss. Principled negotiation focuses on interests rather than positions. Positions are what people say they want. Interests are why they want it. Understanding interests reveals creative solutions that weren't apparent when focusing only on stated positions. Before any important negotiation, research the other party's likely interests, constraints, and alternatives. Develop multiple options that could serve both parties' interests. Active listening. Most people listen just enough to formulate rebuttals rather than truly understanding the other person's perspective. Strategic listeners ask questions to understand underlying concerns and repeat back what they've heard to confirm understanding. This often reveals that apparent conflicts are based on misunderstandings, or that different parties are concerned about different aspects and can find solutions addressing everyone's primary concerns. Chapter 10. Building your strategic future. Strategic planning isn't about predicting the future. It's about developing robust approaches that will work across multiple possible futures while positioning yourself to adapt. Vision development. Begin with understanding your core values and fundamental motivations. What do you care about deeply enough that you'd pursue it even if it's difficult or time-consuming? When you're clear about fundamental values and long-term aspirations, you can make consistent decisions even when facing novel situations or unexpected opportunities. Effective visions are specific enough to provide direction, but flexible enough to accommodate different paths. Focus on outcomes you want to create and principles that will guide your approach. Scenario planning. Instead of predicting one specific future, identify several plausible scenarios and develop strategies that would work across all of them. Identify key uncertainties that could significantly impact your strategic situation: technological developments, economic trends, regulatory changes. Develop 3 to 5 distinct scenarios combining these uncertainties in different ways. For each scenario, identify what strategies would work best and what early warning signals would suggest that scenario is becoming more likely. Strategic resource allocation. Make conscious choices about how to invest your time, attention, and energy to maximize long-term value creation. Use the 80-20 principle to identify the small number of activities, creating the majority of your results. Focus your best resources on your highest leverage opportunities. This might mean saying no to good opportunities, so you can fully commit to great opportunities. Building strategic capabilities. Invest in developing skills, relationships, and resources that will remain valuable across multiple scenarios and time horizons. Meta skills like critical thinking, communication, learning ability, and relationship building tend to remain valuable even when specific technical skills become obsolete. Strategic relationships with people who have complementary skills create mutual value and expand your strategic options. Implementation planning. Translate strategic vision into concrete actions and milestones. Without effective implementation, even brilliant strategies remain just ideas. Break long-term objectives into intermediate milestones, providing feedback about progress and allowing for strategy adjustments. Develop systematic review processes that regularly assess both progress toward objectives and continued validity of underlying assumptions. Strategy requires ongoing adaptation based on new information. Create accountability systems, helping you maintain discipline in executing strategic priorities, even when day-to-day pressures create distractions. We've covered enormous ground together, from understanding how your brain sabotages itself to building frameworks that transform how you see the world. But here's what matters most. Knowledge without action is just entertainment. The techniques you've learned today: pattern recognition, first principles thinking, bias detection, strategic decomposition, effective communication, long-term planning, they're useless until you actually apply them. Starting right now, commit to one specific change. Maybe it's implementing the audio loop before your next important decision. Maybe it's running a pre-mortem analysis on a current project. Maybe it's identifying one mental model you'll deliberately practice this week. Don't try to do everything at once. That's a recipe for doing nothing at all. Choose one principle. Apply it consistently for the next 7 days. Notice what changes. Notice what you see that you didn't see before. Notice how your decisions improve. Then add another principle and another. Gradually, systematically, build a completely different operating system for your brain. Here's what I know from helping thousands of people develop strategic thinking capabilities. The difference between those who transform their lives and those who remain stuck isn't talent, education, or circumstance. It's implementation. It's the willingness to actually practice these techniques when it would be easier to fall back into old patterns. It's the discipline to think strategically, even when you're tired, stressed, or uncertain. It's the commitment to continuous improvement rather than perfection. 6 months from now, you could be the person who sees opportunities others miss, who makes decisions with clarity and confidence, who navigates complexity while others drown in it, who achieves goals that currently seem impossible. Or you could be exactly where you are now, wishing you had started. The choice, as always, is but if you choose to commit, if you choose to actually implement even a fraction of what you've learned today, you'll look back on this moment as a turning point. The moment when you stopped reacting and started strategizing, when you stopped being a victim of circumstances and became an architect of outcomes, when you upgraded your mental operating system and unlocked capabilities you didn't know you possessed. Your brain is ready. The tools are in your hands. The only question remaining is, what will you do with them? Start today. Start small. But your future self will thank you. Thank you for investing this time in developing your strategic thinking capabilities. This is an SMQ audiobook, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, think strategically, act deliberately, and never stop upgrading your mental frameworks. The world needs more strategic thinkers. Be one of them.